What if I told you that much of the stress, frustration, and heaviness you feel every day isn't caused by what you don't have, but by what you continue to carry? We often think life improves by adding more habits, more achievements, more goals. But the truth is, the fastest way to peace is subtraction, removing the unnecessary, the toxic, the distractions that quietly weigh you down. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that freedom and clarity come not from chasing endless desires, but from letting go of what doesn't serve the soul. Epictetus reminded us that suffering is often tied to our attachments, not just to people or things, but to ideas, to fears, and to expectations that chain us to restlessness. If you want to live with strength and peace, you must be ruthless about what you allow to remain in your life. This month can be a reset, a chance to strip away the noise and the clutter, to cut ties with what weakens you, and to step into a lighter, stronger version of yourself. Not by adding something new, but by quietly removing what should never have stayed. So in this episode, we'll explore 10 things you should quietly remove from your life this month, 10 anchors that hold you back, and 10 opportunities to rise above. If you can let go of even one, you'll feel the shift. And if you commit to removing them all, you may discover a freedom you didn't realize was possible. 1. Toxic people who drain your energy. If you think about it carefully, almost every moment of your life is influenced by the people you spend your time with. Their words shape your thoughts, their moods affect your emotions, and their values begin to rub off on your own sense of what is normal. This is why toxic people are so dangerous. They don't just waste your time. They contaminate the atmosphere of your life, making you question yourself, draining your energy, and slowly suffocating your potential without you even realizing it. A toxic person doesn't always reveal themselves immediately. They're not always openly hostile or obviously harmful. Sometimes toxicity is subtle. It's the friend who always finds a way to turn your victories into their defeats. That's great, but you know it won't last, right? It's the colleague who cloaks jealousy in sarcasm, never celebrating your progress, but always finding a flaw to highlight. It's the family member who guilt-trips you for pursuing your dreams instead of following their expectations. On the surface, these moments seem small, but over time, they erode your confidence, cloud your peace, and keep you anchored in negativity. The Stoics understood this danger well. Seneca wrote that if you associate with people who live badly, their influence will corrupt you, just as smoke darkens whatever it touches. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he would encounter people who were arrogant, deceitful, or selfish, but he resolved not to let their nature pollute his own. Toxic people will always exist in the world, but letting them occupy your inner circle is a choice, and one that has consequences. What makes toxic people so draining is not just their negativity, but the way they force you to spend emotional energy defending yourself against their presence. You leave conversations replaying what they said. You lie awake at night wondering if their criticism was right. You start filtering your decisions through how they might react, rather than what truly matters to you. Slowly, without noticing, you begin living in response to them instead of in alignment with yourself. And that is one of the most silent forms of self-betrayal. Consider the hidden cost of keeping toxic people close. Every moment you spend entangled in their chaos is a moment stolen from your own growth. Every ounce of energy spent managing their moods is energy you could have invested in your purpose. Life is short, and yet many of us give away enormous portions of it to people who don't deserve that privilege. Why? Often because we fear confrontation, or because we confuse loyalty with tolerance. or because we tell ourselves we're strong enough to endure it. But enduring toxicity doesn't make you strong, it makes you weaker over time, because strength without boundaries collapses into exhaustion. Detaching from toxic people doesn't always require dramatic battles. Sometimes it's as simple as creating quiet distance. You stop feeding the relationship with constant attention. You respond less to their negativity. You disengage from their drama, and you redirect your focus toward healthier influences. Other times, it requires clear and honest boundaries. I can't continue this conversation if it always turns into criticism. And in some cases, it means making the hardest choice, cutting ties completely. That might feel brutal, especially if the toxic person is someone close to you. But ask yourself, what is more brutal, losing one draining relationship or losing years of your peace and potential? One of the Stoic principles is to focus only on what lies within your control. You cannot control toxic people. You cannot fix their habits, heal their wounds, or reshape their nature. But you can control whether you continue to give them access to your mind and your time. And the moment you decide to take back that control, you reclaim your power. This month, take a quiet inventory of your relationships. Ask yourself, who lifts me up and who drags me down? Who leaves me energized and who leaves me exhausted? Who celebrates my growth and who resents it? The answers may be uncomfortable, but they will be clear. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And that truth is your invitation to act. Removing toxic people is not about hatred or revenge. It's about self-respect. It's about saying, my peace, my focus, and my growth matter too much to be sacrificed at the altar of someone else's dysfunction. You don't need to announce it to them. You don't need to make it dramatic. You simply need to stop allowing them the power to drain you, because every ounce of energy you save by releasing them can be invested in becoming the stronger, calmer, wiser version of yourself. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you create space by removing toxic people, you don't just eliminate negativity, you invite positivity. You leave room for relationships that inspire you, challenge you to rise, and walk with you in peace instead of pulling you into chaos. By saying no to what weakens you, you are saying yes to what strengthens you. That's not selfishness, that's wisdom. Toxic people will always exist in the world, but whether they exist in your world is a choice. Make that choice wisely, and you will find that your life becomes lighter, your mind becomes clearer, and your path forward becomes stronger than ever. 2. Endless comparisons. One of the most silent thieves of joy in our modern world is comparison. It's everywhere, scrolling through social media, talking to colleagues at work, even watching neighbors in your community. Comparison is a trap because it rarely happens in balance. We don't compare ourselves to people with less. We almost always look at those who seem to have more wealth, more recognition, more freedom, more beauty. And every time we compare, we chip away at our own sense of worth. The Stoics understood this danger long before Instagram feeds or office rivalries existed. Epictetus warned against measuring your life by external circumstances that are outside of your control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to envy another's fortune, because what seems like gain on the surface may carry hidden burdens you do not see. Yet, in our age of constant visibility, comparison has become louder, more persistent, and more toxic than ever. Here's the problem. Comparison is rarely fair. You're comparing your private struggles to someone else's highlight reel. You see their polished version, the carefully selected moments they show the world. But you don't see the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the personal battles that made it possible. You measure your behind the scenes against their edited scenes. And of course you come up short. It's like judging a movie by comparing the bloopers of one film to the final cut of another. Think about the emotional cost of constant comparison. It doesn't just create envy, it creates paralysis. Instead of taking action in your own life, you waste energy measuring where you stand against others. You hesitate to start because someone else is already ahead. You doubt your progress because it doesn't look like theirs. And slowly, you stop moving altogether, trapped in the illusion that you're losing a race you were never meant to run. Comparison is not only unfair, it is endless. There will always be someone wealthier, fitter, more admired, or more accomplished. Even if you surpass one person, another will appear immediately to take their place on your scoreboard. That's why comparison feels exhausting, because the finish line keeps moving. You can never arrive, because the goal isn't growth anymore, it's outpacing others. And in that pursuit, you lose sight of your own unique path. The Stoic cure for this is radical focus on your own lane. Epictetus would tell his students to ask, "What is in my power? Can you control how wealthy another person is? Number. Can you control how many followers someone else has? Number. But you can control your own effort, your own discipline, your own choices today. When you shift from competing against others to competing against yourself, you reclaim your power. The only comparison worth making is between who you were yesterday and who you are becoming today. Take a simple example: fitness. Imagine you're starting to exercise after years of neglect. If you compare yourself to someone who has trained for 10 years, you will feel defeated before you even begin. But if you compare yourself to your past self, if you notice that today you ran 5 more minutes than yesterday, you will feel encouraged, empowered, and motivated to keep going. One form of comparison destroys, the other builds. The difference is where your focus lies. Another trap of endless comparison is that it blinds you to your blessings. When you are fixated on what others have, you forget to notice what is already in your hands. Gratitude cannot coexist with constant comparison. You can't truly appreciate your home if you're always staring at someone else's mansion. You can't enjoy your relationships if you're obsessed with how others display theirs online. The irony is that others may even be envying you, while you're too busy looking elsewhere to notice the gifts in your own life. So how do you break free from endless comparison? First, become aware of your triggers. Is it scrolling on social media? Is it conversations with certain people who brag constantly? Once you know the sources, limit your exposure. Protect your mental space. Second, practice gratitude daily. Write down what you have, what you've overcome, what is good in your life right now. Gratitude shifts your lens from lack to abundance. Third, redefine success in your own terms. Ask yourself, what do I truly want, independent of others' opinions? When you know your own values, the noise of comparison fades. The Stoics believed that peace comes from alignment with nature and self, not from measuring against others. Your life is your own path, with its own timing, lessons, and opportunities. Comparing it to someone else's is like comparing the sun to the moon. Both shine, but each in their own time and their own way. Endless comparison is a prison built by the mind. Freedom comes when you realize you were never meant to compete in someone else's race. The only competition that matters is with yourself, becoming wiser, calmer, stronger than you were before. When you live this way, others' success no longer threatens you, it inspires you, and in that moment, comparison ceases to be poison and becomes perspective. 3. Clutter and distractions. There's a reason why Stoic philosophy emphasizes simplicity. Life is already filled with chaos outside our control, yet many of us unknowingly add to the noise by surrounding ourselves with clutter, both physical and mental. It may seem harmless. The messy desk, the endless notifications on your phone, the dozens of browser tabs you never close. But clutter is never neutral. It constantly whispers to your mind, reminding you of unfinished tasks, of things left undone, of weight that keeps piling up. And slowly, without realizing it, clutter steals the clarity and calm you need to focus on what truly matters. Think about the feeling of walking into a clean, organized space versus walking into one filled with piles of papers, laundry, or unfinished projects. The difference isn't just aesthetic, it's psychological. A cluttered environment creates a cluttered mind. Every object out of place is a small demand for your attention, pulling you in directions you didn't choose. Multiply that by dozens, and it becomes impossible to feel at peace. No wonder Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the importance of keeping the soul uncluttered, for only then can it act in harmony with reason and virtue. But clutter isn't only physical. In today's world, the most dangerous clutter is digital. Your phone buzzing every 5 minutes with meaningless alerts. Social media feeds designed to keep you scrolling, filling your brain with fragments of other people's lives. Emails that never stop, even late into the night. This constant flood of information feels like connection, but in reality, it's distraction. It scatters your focus, prevents deep thought, and leaves you exhausted before you've done anything meaningful. The Stoics taught that attention is one of our most precious resources. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is fragmented by clutter and distractions, your life becomes fragmented too. And yet, most people treat their attention casually, giving it away to every notification, every advertisement, every distraction that demands it. Imagine if you treated your money the same way, handing it out to anyone who asked. You'd quickly be bankrupt. And yet attention, which is even more valuable than money, is spent daily on things that do not serve you. The danger of living surrounded by clutter and distraction is that it keeps you reactive instead of intentional. You wake up and check your phone before even taking a breath, already consumed by the world's noise. You sit at your desk to work, but the clutter around you pulls your mind in 10 different directions. You try to think deeply, but constant interruptions break your focus. Over time, this erodes your ability to direct your mind at all. You lose the capacity for concentration, reflection, and presence, the very qualities the Stoics believed define a wise life. But here's the truth. Clutter is a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one. You may not have chosen every item in your home, every app on your phone, every piece of information in your feed, but you choose whether it stays. Each piece of clutter remains because you allow it, and that means you can also decide to remove it. Start small. Clear your desk of everything except what you need for the task at hand. Notice how your mind feels lighter, more able to breathe. Turn off notifications that don't matter. Notice how silence begins to return. Create a daily ritual of digital detox. 1 hour without screens, 1 walk without headphones, 1 meal without distraction. These small acts may feel insignificant, but they retrain your mind to focus, to return to presence, to remember that you are not a slave to noise. The Stoics believed in practicing voluntary hardship, denying yourself certain comforts in order to strengthen the will. Think of decluttering as a form of this discipline. By removing excess, you prove to yourself that you don't need constant stimulation or endless possessions to feel secure. You begin to experience what Seneca called the joy of sufficiency, the deep satisfaction that comes not from more, but from enough. There's also a symbolic power in decluttering. When you clear your environment, you're also clearing your inner world. Throwing away what no longer serves you externally becomes a ritual for letting go of what no longer serves you internally. Old grudges, outdated beliefs, unnecessary obligations. Each act of removal is a statement. I choose clarity over chaos. I choose peace over distraction. I choose to focus on what matters. The truth is, clutter and distraction are not just inconveniences, they are thieves. They rob you of the mental space required for wisdom, creativity, and joy. They make you reactive instead of deliberate, scattered instead of whole. But when you take control, when you remove what doesn't serve you, you experience a new kind of freedom, a clean space, a quiet mind, a focused spirit. So this month, make it your mission to declutter, not just your home, but your habits, your routines, your digital life. Remove the noise, silence the distractions, give yourself the gift of clarity, because in a world that constantly demands your attention, the ability to direct it where you choose is nothing short of power. Clutter and distractions will always exist, but whether they rule your life is up to you. Choose simplicity, and you'll rediscover the focus, peace, and strength that were always waiting beneath the noise. 4. Negative self-talk. Perhaps the most destructive voice in your life isn't the criticism of others, but the quiet, relentless voice inside your own mind. This inner dialogue, what we call self-talk, can either be your greatest ally or your most ruthless enemy. And for many people, it has become the latter. Negative self-talk is the habit of undermining yourself, doubting your worth, magnifying your flaws, and replaying every mistake as if it defines your entire existence. It's the whisper that says, "You're not good enough. You'll never succeed. Why even try?" And when you allow that voice to dominate, you don't just lose confidence, you lose peace. The Stoics would recognize this as a failure of reason. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Negative self-talk is what happens when you surrender that power. Instead of using your mind to guide yourself wisely, you let it bully you, distort reality, and imprison you in self-doubt. It's like having a tyrant inside your head, and the longer you let it rule unchecked, the more it weakens your spirit. The danger of negative self-talk is not only in what it says, but in how often it repeats. The human brain is wired to believe what it hears most frequently. If you constantly tell yourself you are weak, unworthy, or incapable, eventually your brain accepts it as truth, no matter how false it is. And then your actions follow. You hesitate to take risks because you know you'll fail. You sabotage opportunities because you know you don't deserve them. Negative self-talk doesn't just reflect your life, it shapes it. Consider how this plays out in everyday situations. A student who tells herself, "I'm terrible at math," stops putting in effort, and so she never improves, which reinforces the belief. An employee who thinks, "I'll never be a leader," avoids responsibility, and so he never earns promotion, confirming his doubt. A person who whispers, "I'm unlovable," pulls away from intimacy, creating loneliness that seems to prove the voice right. In each case, negative self-talk becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't fail because you're incapable. You fail because you convinced yourself you would. The Stoics approached this problem with discipline. They believed that you must guard your mind as carefully as you guard your body. Just as you wouldn't allow poison into your food, you shouldn't allow toxic words to poison your thoughts. Epictetus taught that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we place upon them. Negative self-talk is nothing more than destructive judgment turned inward. And the good news is that judgments can be changed. So how do you begin to free yourself from this inner critic? The first step is awareness. You cannot fight what you do not recognize. Start paying attention to your inner dialogue. Notice the tone. Is it harsh? Is it unforgiving? Would you speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? Often the cruelty we unleash on ourselves is harsher than anything we would ever direct at another human being. That realization alone can be life-changing. The second step is reframing. When the voice says, "I'll never succeed," add one word, "yet." I haven't succeeded yet. That shift changes the statement from final to temporary. When it says, "I'm terrible at this," reframe it. "I'm still learning this." When it whispers, "I'm unworthy," counter it, "I am growing, and growth takes time." These small changes in language reshape your mind's narrative, and over time they reshape your reality. The third step is practice, deliberate, consistent practice. Just as negative self-talk becomes automatic through repetition, so does positive self-talk. You must consciously replace the toxic thoughts with empowering ones again and again until they become your default response. This isn't about blind optimism or fake affirmations. It's about speaking truth with compassion. It's about reminding yourself that mistakes are lessons, not life sentences. That effort matters more than perfection. That worth is not earned, but inherent. And finally, embrace silence. Sometimes the most powerful way to combat negative self-talk is not to argue with it, but to step back and observe. The Stoics practice this through detachment, realizing that a thought is just a thought, not an absolute truth. When you hear the inner critic, pause and say, "That's just a thought passing through my mind. I don't have to believe it. I don't have to obey it." In that moment, you reclaim your authority. The impact of removing negative self-talk is profound. Without it, you begin to move through life with more courage. You take risks, not because you're guaranteed to win, but because you no longer sabotage yourself before you start. You build relationships, not because you are perfect, but because you believe you are worthy of love despite your flaws. You pursue goals, not because you're certain of success, but because you no longer let fear of failure paralyze you. This month, commit to removing negative self-talk. Quiet the voice that tells you you're not enough, and replace it with one that tells you the truth. You are capable, you are growing, you are worthy of the life you are building. The Stoics would remind you that the quality of your thoughts defines the quality of your life. Free your thoughts from the tyranny of negativity, and you free yourself. Because in the end, the harshest prison you will ever escape is the one you build inside your own mind. 5. Chasing external validation. One of the most subtle but exhausting habits we fall into is the endless pursuit of validation from others. At first it feels harmless, even natural. We all enjoy recognition, encouragement, and praise. But when your sense of worth depends entirely on approval from outside, you give away the most important power you have, the ability to define yourself. Instead of living with inner strength, you live at the mercy of other people's opinions. And that is a prison with invisible bars. The danger of chasing validation is that it never ends. You get one compliment, and for a moment you feel uplifted. But soon the feeling fades and you crave another, then another. It becomes an addiction, a cycle of seeking approval, feeling temporary relief, then falling into emptiness again. You may achieve incredible things, but if you achieve them only to hear applause, you'll never feel satisfied. The applause will always need to be louder, longer, more constant. And the moment it stops, you feel invisible. The Stoics warned against this trap. Epictetus reminded his students that if you live to please others, you will always be their slave. Marcus Aurelius wrote that fame and recognition mean nothing if they are based on the fleeting opinions of people who may not even know themselves. To the Stoics, true freedom was living in alignment with virtue, doing what is right, not what is popular. The moment you hand your self-worth to others, you become a puppet, pulled by strings you cannot control. Think of how chasing validation shows up in everyday life. A person posts on social media not to share, but to be liked. A professional chooses a career not because it fulfills them, but because it looks impressive to others. A student picks a field of study not out of passion, but to satisfy family expectations. In each case, the person sacrifices authenticity for approval, and in doing so, they lose themselves. Chasing validation also breeds insecurity. When your value depends on what others think, you live in constant anxiety. You analyze every interaction. Did they like me? Did I sound stupid? What did they mean by that comment? Your peace rises and falls like a fragile balloon, easily popped by criticism, easily deflated by indifference. You may appear confident on the outside, but inside you're restless, waiting for the next sign of approval to reassure you that you matter. But here's the truth. External validation is unreliable because people are unreliable. Their opinions shift with moods, with trends, with their own insecurities. Today they may admire you, tomorrow they may envy you. Today they may applaud, tomorrow they may criticize. If you tether your worth to such instability, you will forever feel unstable yourself. It's like building your house on sand. The foundation will not hold. So, what is the alternative? The Stoics would say, anchor yourself in internal validation. Ask not, what do they think of me? But, am I living according to my values? Am I acting with integrity? Am I growing into the person I want to be? When the answer to those questions is yes, then no external opinion can shake you. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes useful but not defining. You become steady, unshaken by the waves of other people's approval or disapproval. This doesn't mean you must ignore feedback or live without community. It means you must filter feedback through your own values. If the criticism is true and helps you grow, accept it. If it's false or malicious, let it go. You are no longer a servant to every opinion because you've built your own internal compass, and that compass points to virtue, to discipline, to authenticity. Practical steps help here. Each day, instead of asking, "Did I impress anyone today?" ask, "Did I stay true to myself today?" Write down your values and measure your actions against them. Keep promises to yourself, even small ones. Each time you do, you strengthen your inner validation system. And soon, you'll find that you don't need the constant reassurance of others because you've learned to reassure yourself through consistent action. The greatest irony of chasing external validation is that it often backfires. People are drawn to those who live authentically, who don't desperately seek approval. The less you chase it, the more naturally it comes. But by then, you won't be enslaved by it anymore. You'll appreciate it, but you won't depend on it. This month, commit to removing the habit of chasing validation. Notice the moments when you act only for approval and ask yourself, would I still do this if no one noticed? If the answer is no, pause and rethink. Choose actions that matter to you, not just to the crowd. Because when you live this way, your worth no longer depends on applause. It depends on truth. And truth, unlike opinion, never fades. In the end, the loudest applause you should crave is not from the crowd, but from the quiet voice inside that says, I stayed true today. I lived with integrity. I was enough without needing anyone else to tell me so. That is the only validation that lasts. 6. Unnecessary commitments. One of the most subtle ways we drain ourselves is by saying yes too often, yes to obligations we don't care about, yes to responsibilities that don't align with our values, yes to people and projects that leave us depleted instead of fulfilled. At first, these commitments seem small, even harmless. A quick favor, a casual promise, a social event you don't really want to attend. But when stacked together, they form a heavy burden. And that burden weighs on your time, your energy, and your ability to focus on what truly matters. The Stoics taught that time is the most precious resource we have. Seneca, in his essay on the shortness of life, warned that we waste our days as if we had endless reserves, forgetting that each yes we give away is a slice of our limited life. He wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And what greater waste than filling your days with commitments that add no meaning, no value, no alignment with your deeper purpose? The danger of unnecessary commitments is that they don't just consume your time, they consume your attention. Even when you're not physically doing them, they linger in the back of your mind. You remember the promise you made, the event you must attend, the task you reluctantly agreed to. Each one pulls at your focus like a small weight, scattering your thoughts and leaving you feeling restless. By the time you arrive at the commitments that truly matter, your personal growth, your relationships, your work of purpose, your energy is already spent. Why do we take on so many unnecessary commitments? Often it's out of fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being judged as lazy, selfish, or unhelpful, fear of missing out on opportunities, even when those opportunities don't align with our values. Sometimes it's ego, the desire to appear important, to feel needed, to be everywhere and do everything. But beneath these fears lies a truth. When you cannot say no, you are no longer in control of your life. Others are steering it for you. The Stoics would call this a lack of discipline, not in the sense of laziness, but in the failure to discipline your choices. Discipline is not just about working hard, it's about working on the right things. If you spend your energy scattered across commitments that don't matter, you are disciplined in activity, but not in direction. You are busy, but not purposeful. And busyness without alignment is simply another form of slavery. Consider how this looks in everyday life. You commit to a social event you don't want to attend, and then you resent it the entire week. You agree to a work project out of obligation, and then it eats into the time you could have spent on your own goals. You accept invitations, favors, and requests, not because you want to, but because you don't want to face the discomfort of saying no. Each yes seems small, but together they create a life crowded with noise, leaving little room for what truly matters. The path forward is not to reject all commitments, but to become ruthless in choosing the right ones. The Stoics believed in aligning every action with virtue and reason. That means asking, before you commit, does this serve my values? Does this bring me closer to the person I want to become? Does this contribute to the life I want to live? If the answer is no, then the answer should be no. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Learning to say no is an act of courage. It feels uncomfortable at first because we are trained to equate no with rejection. But in truth, every no is also a yes. A yes to your peace, a yes to your priorities, a yes to the things that truly matter. When you decline unnecessary commitments, you are not failing others. You are protecting the integrity of your time. Practical steps can help here. Before agreeing to anything, pause. Don't respond immediately. Give yourself space to ask whether this commitment deserves your energy. Create a simple filter. If it doesn't align with your values, if it doesn't excite you, if it doesn't contribute to your growth, it's unnecessary, and unnecessary commitments must go. The irony is that by removing these commitments, you actually become more reliable. When you stop scattering yourself across things you don't care about, you free up energy to fully honor the commitments you do choose. You show up with presence, with strength, with sincerity. People may notice you say no more often, but they will also notice that your yes has more weight. This month, make it a practice to quietly remove at least one unnecessary commitment from your life. Cancel the obligation that brings no value. Decline the invitation that doesn't align with your priorities. Release yourself from the false duty of pleasing everyone. You will discover that life feels lighter, your mind feels clearer, and your time becomes more meaningful. The Stoics remind us that life is not measured by its length, but by its depth. And depth cannot be achieved when your days are crowded with commitments that don't matter. To live deeply, you must clear the space, remove the unnecessary, and you'll finally have room for what truly matters. 7. Resentment and old grudges. Few things weigh heavier on the human heart than carrying resentment. It feels justified at first. Someone wronged you, betrayed you, hurt you, and holding on to that pain feels like a way to honor the truth of what happened. But over time, resentment transforms from memory into poison. It doesn't punish the person who harmed you. It punishes you. It doesn't keep the past alive as justice. It keeps you chained to it as a prisoner. And every day you carry it, it eats away at your peace, your clarity, and your ability to fully live in the present. The Stoics warned against this trap. Epictetus said bluntly that if someone wrongs you, it is their character that is harmed, not yours. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often that other people's faults belong to them, and that holding anger only binds you to their actions. The wisdom here is simple, but difficult. When you carry resentment, you allow the offense to live inside you long after the moment has passed. You give your enemy free rent in your mind. Think of how this plays out in everyday life. Someone insults you years ago, and yet you still replay the words in your head. A betrayal from a friend keeps you suspicious of every new relationship. A mistake by a colleague keeps you bitter long after they've forgotten it. The other person has moved on, perhaps never even thinking of you, but you remain stuck in the loop. Resentment freezes time, making you live today as if yesterday never ended. The cost is enormous. Resentment clouds your judgment. You start to see people through the lens of past hurts instead of present reality. It drains your energy because anger requires constant feeding to stay alive. It blocks your capacity for joy because bitterness and gratitude cannot coexist in the same heart. And worst of all, it steals your freedom. Every time you replay the offense, you relive the wound. You become tethered to the very person you wish to escape. But here's the paradox. Letting go of resentment doesn't mean excusing the harm. It doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't matter. It means choosing not to let the past dictate your future. It means refusing to drink poison every day, hoping the other person suffers. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, is less about them and more about you. It is an act of liberation, the decision to release yourself from carrying what no longer serves you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Holding resentment makes you more like them, trapped, bitter, reactive. Releasing it makes you free, steady, untouchable. The true act of strength is not clinging to anger, but transcending it." So how do you let go of old grudges? First, acknowledge them honestly. Denying that you're still hurt only buries the resentment deeper. Bring it to light. Admit, "I am still angry at what happened. I still feel the wound." Awareness is the first step to healing. Second, reframe the story. Instead of seeing yourself only as a victim, ask, "What did this experience teach me? How did it strengthen me? What can I take from it that makes me wiser?" Every wound can be a lesson if you are willing to look at it that way. When you shift from "this ruined me" to "this shaped me," resentment begins to lose its grip. Third, practice release daily. This doesn't happen in a single moment. It's a discipline. When the old memory surfaces, don't fight it, but don't feed it either. Breathe, acknowledge it, and remind yourself, that moment is past. It does not belong to me anymore. Over time, the memory loses its sting. It becomes part of your story, not the chain that binds it. Forgiveness, then, is not weakness. It is power. It's saying, "You no longer control my thoughts, my emotions, my life." It doesn't mean reconciliation is always possible. Some people may never belong in your life again. But forgiveness frees you from needing them to change in order for you to heal. You reclaim your peace on your own terms. This month, choose to lay down at least one old grudge. Notice the weight it has carried in your mind for months or years. Ask yourself what freedom would feel like without it, and then quietly but firmly release it. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to tell them. You simply have to let yourself move forward. Because resentment is like dragging a chain behind you everywhere you go. It slows you, it tires you, it makes life harder than it needs to be. The moment you let it go, you'll feel lighter. You'll realize that the greatest gift you can give yourself is not revenge, but release. The Stoics remind us, peace is not found in changing others, but in mastering ourselves. And nothing demonstrates that mastery more than the ability to forgive, to let go, and to walk forward unburdened. 8. Procrastination and excuses. If there's one habit that quietly robs more people of their potential than almost any other, it's procrastination. On the surface, it looks harmless. You tell yourself, "I'll start tomorrow," or "I'll do it when I feel ready." You convince yourself that waiting is strategy, that delay is wisdom. But beneath those excuses lies the truth. Procrastination is fear disguised as patience. And the longer you allow it to stay, the more it drains your life of progress and purpose. The Stoics were relentless about time. Seneca warned that life is long if you know how to use it, but tragically short if you waste it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that death could come at any moment, and that delaying action was the same as throwing life away. For them, procrastination wasn't just a bad habit. It was a moral failure, a refusal to live fully in the present. And if we're honest, that's exactly what procrastination is, a way of rejecting the now, hoping that some perfect future will arrive where effort is no longer required. But the perfect moment never comes. Tomorrow brings its own distractions, its own excuses, its own obstacles. When you procrastinate, you train your mind to believe that action is optional. Each delay strengthens the muscle of avoidance and weakens the muscle of discipline. Over time, this becomes a cycle that's difficult to escape. You avoid the task, you feel guilty, the guilt makes you anxious, and the anxiety makes you avoid even more. The very act of delay becomes heavier than the task itself. Think of how often procrastination shapes daily life. You delay having a difficult conversation, and in the meantime, resentment grows. You delay starting the project, and opportunities pass by. You delay taking care of your health, and your body suffers the consequences. Each delay feels small in the moment, but when accumulated over years, procrastination becomes a thief of entire futures. The life you could have lived slips quietly through your fingers, not because you lacked talent or resources, but because you kept waiting. Excuses are procrastination's partner in crime. They give you permission to delay, to pretend your inaction is justified. I don't have time. I don't have the tools. I'm not ready yet. But peel back the layers of these excuses, and you'll find fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. Excuses are nothing more than fear dressed in logic, and as long as you accept them, you'll remain stuck. The Stoics would argue that fear itself is not the problem, it's your response to it. Epictetus taught that events themselves don't harm us, but our opinions about them do. When you delay action out of fear, you give fear power. When you act despite fear, you reclaim it. Procrastination, then, is not just laziness, it's surrender. It's handing over your power to fear and calling it strategy. So how do you break free? The first step is to face the truth. There is no perfect time. If you're waiting for clarity, certainty, or courage before acting, you'll wait forever. Clarity comes through action, not before it. Courage is built by doing, not by thinking. The only way out of procrastination is to start. Small, imperfect, but immediate. The second step is discipline. The Stoics believed in building habits of deliberate action. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Replace wasting with doing. Set deadlines for yourself, even artificial ones, and honor them as sacred. Break tasks into smaller pieces so they feel less overwhelming, and reward yourself for consistency, not perfection." Over time, these small acts retrain your mind to associate action with relief rather than fear. The third step is accountability. Share your goals with someone you trust. Not because their approval defines you, but because accountability makes procrastination harder to justify. When you know someone else is watching, your excuses lose their strength. But perhaps the most powerful shift is philosophical, remembering the brevity of life. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that time is slipping through his hands with every breath. When you internalize this truth, procrastination feels less like a bad habit and more like a theft. Every delay is not just a wasted day, it's a wasted life. And that realization can ignite the urgency needed to act. This month, commit to removing procrastination and excuses. Don't tell yourself you'll do it later. Prove to yourself you can do it now. Start with something small, a call you've delayed, a task you've avoided, a step you've feared. Act on it today, not tomorrow. Each time you do, you weaken procrastination's grip and strengthen your will. Because here's the truth. Life doesn't wait. Opportunities don't wait. Your growth doesn't wait. The world keeps moving whether you act or not. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the greatest enemy you faced was not failure, not rejection, but delay. Procrastination and excuses may feel safe, but they're chains. Break them, and you'll discover that the freedom of action, even imperfect action, is far lighter than the weight of endless waiting. 9. Fear of missing out. FOMO. One of the most modern forms of quiet suffering is the fear of missing out. At its core, FOMO is the feeling that life is happening somewhere else, with someone else, and without you. It's the gnawing thought that if you're not constantly involved, constantly connected, constantly doing what others are doing, you're somehow falling behind. This fear may seem small, but it is powerful. It breeds anxiety, restlessness, and discontent, keeping you always chasing, never satisfied. The Stoics would have seen FOMO for what it truly is, a failure to live in the present. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, yet FOMO drags your attention out of the present and into an imaginary life somewhere else." You may be at home, surrounded by peace, but your mind is scrolling through images of what others are doing, and suddenly peace feels like boredom. You may have a meaningful path of your own, but comparison convinces you that someone else's path is better. The result is that you are everywhere and nowhere at once, restless, scattered, unable to appreciate what is right in front of you. The danger of FOMO is that it's endless. No matter what you do, there will always be something you're missing. If you attend one event, you miss another. If you pursue one career, you leave behind dozens of alternatives. Life itself is limitation. Choosing one thing necessarily means not choosing countless others. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from desiring only what is within your control. And what is never in your control? The infinite possibilities of what you might be missing. If you try to chase them all, you guarantee yourself misery. Think about how FOMO shows up today. Social media is the perfect breeding ground. You see pictures of friends traveling, colleagues celebrating milestones, strangers showing off lifestyles that seem glamorous. The message is constant. You should be doing more. You should be elsewhere. Your life is not enough. Even when you accomplish something, FOMO whispers, "Yes, but look what they did." This endless chase creates a sense of inadequacy, as if you're always one step behind in a race you never chose to run. The cost is profound. FOMO robs you of contentment because it keeps you focused on absence instead of presence. It creates shallow engagement. You dabble in everything but commit to nothing. It fuels distraction because you're always checking what else is happening instead of immersing yourself where you are. And worst of all, it blinds you to the richness of your own journey. Life isn't happening elsewhere. Life is happening now. But if your mind is consumed with fear of missing out, you miss the only thing you truly have, the present moment. The Stoic cure for FOMO is acceptance, not passive resignation, but active alignment with reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs?" In other words, trust that the life unfolding for you is the life meant for you. Yes, you will miss out on many things, but that is not failure. That is the nature of being human. Freedom is not in chasing everything. It's in being fully present with what you've chosen. So how do you begin to remove FOMO from your life? First, limit the inputs that feed it. If scrolling on your phone makes you feel inadequate, reduce it. Curate your environment so that you're not constantly bombarded with illusions of what you're missing. Second, practice gratitude deliberately. Write down the blessings, opportunities, and experiences you already have. Gratitude shifts the lens from absence to abundance. Third, Commit deeply to fewer things. When you invest yourself fully in what truly matters, a meaningful project, a relationship, personal growth, you stop caring about the noise of what you didn't choose. Presence cures. FOMO. Practical wisdom also helps here. Remember that most of what you see others doing is illusion. Social media shows the highlights, not the struggles. The glamorous trip hides the loneliness. The career success hides the sacrifices. The appearance of having it all is just that, an appearance. When you internalize this, FOMO loses its bite. You realize you're not missing out on perfection. You're only missing out on someone else's carefully curated narrative. This month, commit to quieting FOMO. Each time you feel that anxious thought, I should be there, I should be doing more, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, what do I have right now that is worth appreciating? Anchor yourself in the present. Because the truth is, you can miss 1,000 events, 1,000 opportunities, and still live a life rich with meaning if you are fully engaged in the path you've chosen. The Stoics remind us, happiness is not found in chasing every possibility, but in embracing the one you're living. FOMO is fear. Presence is freedom. And when you choose presence, you stop missing out, not because you're everywhere, but because you are truly here. 10. Attachment to things you can't control. If there is one lesson at the heart of Stoicism, it is this. Peace begins when you stop attaching yourself to what lies outside your control. And yet, most of our suffering comes from doing the opposite. We cling to outcomes, to other people's opinions, to circumstances, to events we cannot change. We convince ourselves that if we just hold on tightly enough, life will bend to our will. But the truth is harsh and liberating. No matter how much you grip, the world will move as it will. Your only power is in how you respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The wisdom is clear. Control is an illusion when directed outward. Yet, attachment to externals makes us slaves to them. We tie our happiness to things that shift with the wind, wealth, status, recognition, even the behavior of those we love. And when they change, as they inevitably do, we collapse with them. Think of how often this attachment shapes daily life. You want recognition at work, but when it doesn't come, you feel defeated. You expect a relationship to unfold a certain way, but when the other person chooses differently, you are shattered. You invest yourself in a plan, but life interrupts it, and you spiral into frustration. Each of these moments reveals the same truth. By attaching your peace to what you cannot control, you hand over the keys to your happiness. The Stoics saw this attachment as the root of misery. Epictetus compared it to anchoring yourself to a moving ship. The moment it sails, you are dragged with it. The only way to remain free is to release the rope. This doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean you stop caring, stop loving, stop striving. It means you love, you strive, you give your best effort, but you release the outcome. You commit to the process, not the result. Because the result is never fully in your hands. This detachment is not coldness, it is strength. It is the ability to hold life with open hands rather than clenched fists. To say, I will do what I can, but I will not destroy myself over what I cannot. Imagine the lightness that comes from this. Imagine pursuing your career with full effort, but without desperation for validation. Imagine loving deeply, but without trying to control another's choices. Imagine facing challenges, but without collapsing when outcomes shift. That is freedom, not the absence of effort, but the absence of attachment. The danger of attachment is that it blinds you. When you cling too tightly to a specific outcome, you fail to see opportunities that appear when plans change. You resist reality instead of adapting to it. You waste energy fighting what already is, instead of directing energy toward what could be. It's like standing in the ocean and demanding the waves stop coming. You can fight until you drown, or you can learn to surf. The waves won't change, but your relationship with them can. So how do you begin to release this destructive attachment? Start with awareness. Notice the moments when frustration rises. Ask yourself, am I suffering because of the event itself, or because I wanted it to be different? More often than not, the pain comes from expectation, not reality. The Stoics taught that events are neutral. It is our judgments that make them blessings or curses. Next, practice focusing on effort over outcome. Instead of saying, I must win, say, I will give my best. Instead of saying, they must love me, say, I will love with integrity. Instead of saying, the plan must succeed, say, I will adapt and grow, no matter what happens. When your satisfaction comes from effort, you remain steady, even when outcomes shift. Finally, cultivate gratitude for what is, instead of grief for what isn't. Attachment often makes us blind to the blessings in front of us because we're obsessed with what's missing. Gratitude reorients us. It trains the mind to see abundance instead of lack, presence instead of absence. And in gratitude, attachment loosens its grip. This month, commit to quietly removing attachment to what you cannot control. Notice where you are clinging too tightly, to outcomes, to approval, to circumstances. Loosen your grip. Remind yourself, I control my choices, not the world. I control my actions, not their results. And in that reminder, feel the freedom that comes with release. Because in the end, the more you attach yourself to what is beyond your reach, the more life will disappoint you. But the more you anchor yourself in what is within your reach, your thoughts, your actions, your character, the more unshakable you become. The Stoics remind us that peace is not about controlling the storm, but about mastering the self within it. Release what you cannot control, and you will find a strength no storm can break. At the heart of Stoicism lies a simple truth. Peace doesn't come from adding more to your life. It comes from removing what doesn't belong. Toxic people, endless comparisons, clutter, negative self-talk, the chase for external validation, unnecessary commitments, old grudges, procrastination, fear of missing out, and attachment to what you cannot control. These are the invisible chains that weigh you down, day after day, often without you realizing it. But you don't have to carry them anymore. This month, you can make a different choice. You can strip away the noise, the distractions, the false obligations, and return to the core of who you are. You can live lighter, freer, and stronger. Not because the world has changed, but because you've decided to stop dragging what no longer serves you. The Stoics remind us that freedom is not in owning more, but in needing less. And when you remove these 10 things quietly, with intention, you discover a kind of strength that no one can take from you. The strength of a clear mind, an uncluttered soul, and a life lived on your own terms. So I'll leave you with this question. What will you choose to remove this month? Because the moment you let go of what weakens you, you make space for what will finally set you free. If this episode gave you clarity, make sure you subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and keep walking your journey with courage. Remember, freedom begins not with what you gain, but with what you release.